All right, I think we can get this show on the road. All right, hello everyone. A really warm welcome to you all. Thanks so much for joining us for today's webinar, Inclusivity in the Digital Age, the launch of our newest Alvanon standard, North American Women, Petite, Petite Plus, and Bold Curve Petite. My name is Saul Guzman. I am the Communications Director at Alvanon, and I will be your moderator today. While we wait for everyone to join, we see some of you already doing this. Tell us where you're joining us from in the chat. Welcome to everyone. And for those of you not familiar with Alvanon, we are a global innovations company for apparel brands and retailers of all sizes. Our digital body technology and body shape data together ensure better fit and sizing and less weight for the fashion and apparel industry. All right. A little bit of housekeeping before we get started. Today's presentation will run roughly 40 minutes. We will leave plenty of time at the end for Q&A. So please submit any questions via the Q&A button in your Zoom toolbar. Apologies, the chat is not working, but any questions for our speakers, you can send it through the Q&A. This webinar is being recorded, and the recording will be sent out 24 hours after the completion of this webinar. And if you experience any other technical difficulties during the presentation, please reach out to me directly. I'll be keeping a close eye on the Q&A function just to see if there's any other hiccups. All right. And we would like to get to know you more about, those of you joining us today. Please take a moment to answer this poll. We thought we'd get a little poll together. There's only 2 questions here. Let me just make sure. Go ahead and launch it. Great. So there we go. All right, we want to know a little bit more about you. So there's just 2 simple questions. Do you work with forms and mannequins? And the second question, do you work in 3D or in 3D design? So let us know. And also, if you have any questions, like I said, please feel free to put them in the Q&A. All right, so moving on today, Alvanon is very excited to be introducing the newest Alvanon fit and sizing standard, North American Women Petite, Petite Plus, and Bold Curve Petite. This standard represents the actual size, shape, and stature of petite women in North America today. This standard also rounds out our full catalog of sizing standards for North American populations, including men, women, and children. I'll be sure to include that link for you guys. If you'd like to follow along and take a deeper look at the series, I'll be sure to include a link to the measurements and specs for you to check those out. And now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce the incredible team leading this research and today's speakers: Alvanon Executive Director of Consulting, Don Howard, Director of Block and Grading Services, Christina Onusko, and Senior Technical Consultant of Blocks and Gradings, Kimberly Wick. So enough from me now. I would like to hand it over to Don. Hi, Don. Oh, 1 second. I think you're mute. There you go.
There you go. Thank you, Saul, and thank you. Welcome, everyone, and thanks for joining us today. As we said, we're launching this latest in our standard series, the North American Women Petite and Petite Plus. The title here, Inclusivity in the Digital Age, is quite a broad topic. No shortage of things that we could be talking about there. But we thought that for today, of course, we want to provide the details, kind of the reasons why we would launch this particular new standard, but also use the time to discuss some practical topics that we come along with by using these digital tools in 3D. And in doing so, I'm just delighted to be joined today by Chris Onusko and Kimberly Wick. Ladies, please say hello.
Hey, everyone. Welcome.
Hi.
If you don't know them, you should. We're going to get into some of these topics along the way to make this hopefully a little bit more interesting, other than the standard itself. So just a little background on, of course, those who know Alvanon and maybe those who don't. We have a relentless focus on fit and sizing. And we're here to provide industry with standard tools for garment evaluation that really form the foundation for fit consistency over time, right? And we know that if you don't have a standard, you really don't have a logical basis for making decisions or taking action. And along those lines, over the years, we've done everything we can to provide some updated regional standards that can serve as off-the-shelf fit tool options, right? And those are available, of course, to our clients as physical fit forms and the identical 3D avatars. If you are interested in knowing how we develop these standards, it's really in conjunction with our consulting team, all the data we have, the experience over the years working in all these regions, and of course, our valuable 3D modeling teams. And recently, we've really had a focus on inclusive ranges, right? We want to provide practical access to these ranges that are going to more closely reflect the diversity and the end use of today's consumer, right? And also, we continue to advance our own technology, evidenced by the continual development of complete size sets that really, kind of in our view, support the digitization of the industry itself. So why petite? Why are we here talking about petite? We recently launched our North American series in the regular range, which include a couple of different shapes, if you remember, including bold curve, and of course extended into the plus range. Petite is another natural extension, and kind of like plus size, it's really nothing new when you think about it. For those of us who've been in the industry for a long time, yes, it's inclusive, but it's not new. As a matter of fact, we can trace commercial references to plus size and ready to wear as early as the 1920s. And for petite, as a historical reference, we can go back to the 40s. There was a designer at the time named Hannah Troy. And she was a very, she made a lot of very tailored clothing. And she recognized that there were many women that would try on her designs that were struggling in proportion around the shoulders, waistlines, and the dresses just didn't fit properly. And also important to that were that if you did go through these alterations for stature, it would really spoil the design, and it was quite difficult to do so. So she kind of questioned that, and what would she do like we do today? We go to the data sets. And at the time, there were data available for women that happened to be Army volunteers from World War II. And it confirmed her assumption that there were many people in the population just weren't as tall as fashion might indicate. So she decided to make adjustments to those products and introduce what is now known as petite sizing, and it really kind of took off. Now, the word petite itself is a bit problematical, okay? If we trace it to its roots, obviously it's a French word, translates to small or short, but if you're making clothing, that's technically very unclear. And over the years, it unfortunately has been interpreted as both being shorter and being smaller at the same time. Now, another thing that we do have to acknowledge up front and here in 2023, technical terms like petite and other historical designations like plus are really sounding outdated today. So we want to make sure that you understand we're using them as technical terms because they are quite, they're cringeworthy actually when you think about them. But from a technical product point of view, they are technical designations. Now, when we talk about common industry technical designations for petite, would describe people who are shorter and probably typically 5'4" and under. Now, the other thing we do know, like all other women in the universe, just because you're under 5'4", you still come in a wide variety of sizes and shapes, just like your taller sisters would. Quickly giving you a data point here, we quite frequently are asked, to look, if you look at this scatter plot, if you haven't seen one before, I'll quickly explain it to you. These individual dots are actually body scans that would be in this particular data set. And we're looking at North America here, and the blue dots represent women who are above 5'4", and the red dots signify scans of women who would fall below 5'4" in stature. And what this tells us is really about size and shape. The bigger folks are on this end of the range, and the smaller folks are on this end of the range. But really what it tells us at a glance is overall body shape and size don't change radically when you're disaggregating by stature. Might sound surprising to some, but it's really not. So, but before I go too much further, I do have to hit the data a little harder here because a lot of people are very focused and they perseverate on data. Today it's widely reported that the average height of a US female is 5'4". So when you stop and think about that for a minute, if the industry definition for petite is 5'4" and under, you could easily deduce that that's like half of the population, right? Sounds like a lot, but if you're like me, an observer of people, the next time you're at a shopping mall or at the airport, just take a look around because people who fit the petite profile are really hiding in plain sight. And many times you don't have to look any further than popular culture. This is just kind of a fun image of some of the celebrities that you might know that you didn't really think about that are actually well into the petite range, right? We've got a range here of 4'11" all the way to 5'4", and there we have Queen Elizabeth, the tallest in this example. Another kind of fun fact to look at here, most of them are wearing heels, right? So it's easy if you're Janelle Monáe there at 5 foot tall and you happen to have a 5-inch heel, I guess suddenly you're 5'5". That might be great for the overall stature, but certainly wouldn't solve for some of the other stature components that would be necessary to create really well-fitting clothing. So again, just to bang on the data here a little bit longer, because many people in this audience are technical and they enjoy this kind of thing, right? This is what we do. We're kind of geeks when it comes to data. So where do you draw the line when it comes to a height standard? So, regular height, I say that in air quotes, right? Commercial standards for base fit size, in our observation range anywhere between 5'5" and 5'8". It really depends on the brand and their vision of what their end consumer looks like. So when you think about that, it is logical because it kind of falls midway between a population data average of 5'4" and then the extreme height you might see on a legacy fashion model or on the runway, maybe 5'10" and taller. So, from a commercial point of view, if you're going to establish a petite standard, it's really important that it needs to be considered relative to whatever your existing regular height standard is, and then it must be significantly differentiated from there, or there's no real reason to be doing it. So with that, I'd like to kind of give you visibility to our new North American Women Petite. And again, in line with what I was just talking about, how does it distinguish itself from the regular standard? I have this image here that kind of shows you the recent launch of our North American regular height standard, which is the taller one to the left of the image. She's at 5'6". That's where we determined that standard would fit. So, as we reviewed our data and decided where we would position a petite standard, we decided that 5'2.5" was really kind of in a sweet spot. And if you think back to that celebrity image, it's kind of a halo that would accommodate someone who might be kind of short as 5 foot tall, which is very common, up to that cuspy end of 5'3", 5'4", right? Another significant feature that we have to highlight, there would be no change in size. In other words, bust, waist, low hip, those girth measurements do not change. So we're talking about the same size and shape, who happens to be shorter in stature. And so at the end of the day, the big lesson here is it's all about proportion, right? Now, Chris, I'm going to bring you in here to talk a little bit. We've seen any number of combinations of ways that brands and retailers would accommodate their version of a petite customer. Can you give me a couple of examples kind of off the top here?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So many times, I think probably the biggest one through the years has been, just shorten the arm, shorten the inseam a little bit and call it good, and it's not really paying attention to what's happening in the torso and all those areas. I love the fact that I thought that the scatter plots we looked at really tell a big story when you're looking at the shape, because the size and the shape, it's all there at the different heights, and it's all the same. And I think that's a big part that people haven't paid close attention to. Maybe a little more awareness is coming now, but it certainly warrants some attention.
Yeah. So that's why, especially at Alvanon, our focus is on the body first, right? Getting that body standard established, and then you get to do your brand expression. Then you get into the garment aesthetics. And when you're talking about petite aesthetics, that's a whole other subject we could spend hours on. The tips and tips and tricks that one would use to scale proportion, but we're not going to talk about that today. Also, we cannot forget about end use function, right? If you're performing, if you're doing anything that's in a performance realm athletically, and of course, we often forget safety in the workplace. So many of our customers create product that's in the workwear industry or safety. So you can imagine if the proportions aren't right for that end use product, it's a real hazard in the workplace. So we're going to continue here, because of our recent launch in North America, we found that the bold curve was really an important shape to provide for our customers as well. So we've also done our bold curve petite. So here you can see it's exactly the same methodology. We're taking our bold curve reg height women's body. We're converting it to 5'2" now. Again, there's zero change to the shaping characteristics. It's just really about the stature. And again, at the end of the day, regardless of the shape, it's all about proportion. So, Chris, we're talking today specifically about these tools, whether it's the physical fit form, or of course, today, as we transition into 3D, I kind of bristle when I hear the casual use of the word digital twin, with all the talk of the metaverse. Hear people all the time talking about digital twins when in fact, many times they are not. But here, in this case, when you're transitioning into 3D, this is truly a digital twin. We get a lot of questions about, reviewing these bodies in a new environment. Can you kind of walk us through that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. We certainly have had a lot of questions, especially around whenever a client receives their reference alba form and how to review the body in the 3D space. And, it really is all about bridging the great technical tools that you're used to using in the physical or more tactical sense, right? So we're used to being able to touch, be able to feel, and it really is now about moving into this new world in 3D and bridging and taking those tools with us and knowing that you can trust them. Trusting, we know that is a real key element in working in 3D, and trusting what you see, but more important than that is even also understanding what you're seeing and then trusting that so you can make the right decisions for the physical product that you're creating. Really the end goal is still the production of physical garments. We can live in the 3D world, but we know that ultimately it has to turn into a physical garment, and you need to be able to trust how you're working, the tools that you have. Alvanon is always focused on creating tools and standards that support an accurate fit and fit evaluation, and that's really important. Coming into 3D, you know, the great thing about the virtual alboform is that you really can immediately trust that the dimensions and the shape, when you bring that alboform in, it really is a digital twin to the physical alboform. It is an exact replica from your, if you have the physical alboform and then you're moving into 3D, you can absolutely trust that it's an exact replica. And to further evolve, you know, within the 3D world, you know, the virtual alboforms are developed using a special polygon mesh, and that has been designed specifically with pose development and human-like features in mind. That includes attention to muscle movement and the body deformation as a result of when the body changes poses or moves into a more animated state. You know, we're continually working on the next progression in 3D because it's absolutely the way of the future. And there are a lot of exciting things coming for virtual alboforms. You know us, our focus is on fit, and most importantly for us, our focus is on a truly accurate fit in 3D. So today we want to share some thoughts around reviewing a virtual alboform body in 3D. First and foremost, you always want to be sure that your system is up to date with the most current software you're using. And we know they're updating rapidly. You know, our team, Kim and Liz, the other member of my team, you know, they work in 3D all the time and they're continually updating because the updates are coming so fast, which is great. So be sure that your software is current, and then be sure to follow the tutorials on the Alvanon body platform so that when you're downloading the virtual alboform, you're getting all the permission files and you're really ready to go. So we're going to take a look now at some tips for reviewing a virtual alboform in 3D, you know, things that we've learned, things that might be important even before you think about putting garments on it. When you're reviewing the body, when you first get a virtual alboform, things that you can use to your advantage in 3D that we can't do in a physical form, which is really kind of cool. Some of the examples you're going to see now are both in browswear and Clo. So Kim, let's talk about lighting and background settings.
Yeah, well, familiarize yourself with whatever software you're using. Having the right lighting setting can be really helpful when you're reviewing the shapes and the contours and even the posture. Each software is going to have lighting presets, and you'll be able to adjust your backgrounds, and you want to adjust it so that you know, you're not washing out or getting too bright lighting or too much shine. So finding the right light settings and then finding a nice background that's going to give you a good contrast against what you're seeing is really going to help you when you're reviewing the stature and shapes of that form. This is going to be a video so that we're going to look at also the views. When you view the alboform, there's going to be presets where you can view it from the front, back, right, left, top, bottom, but you can also customize your views and you can move around freely and look at that avatar in ways that you really can't look at a physical form as easily in. And then also the different poses. You want to change the poses of the avatar, look at it in all the views. Like they indicated, the body shapes are not going to change as you change the views, but you are going to be able to see different things. Putting the body in a T pose, for instance, looking at it from the side view, you know, helps versus having it in the arms down position. Here we're looking at the same thing. We're looking at the different views, but we're looking at it in a mesh form, in a polygon mesh form. The different softwares are going to have different names for it. Browswear calls it wireframe, Clo calls it mesh, some call it X-ray. But this gives us kind of that transparent view where we can look at the polygon line and the vertexes, and you can kind of see through it, and it allows us to see some of the more intricate shapes of that form, like the armholes, the shaping of the bust, the distribution of that shaping in the bust, the crotch shaping, some of those things that you're not going to see when you can't really see through that garment as well.
Yeah, and you know, this view is so cool, don't you think? because, you know, it gives you a chance when you're getting the physical fit form, you can't really look at this and have the opportunity to move it around, you know, the way we're seeing here.
Right.
It's really great.
Yeah, try that on your physical tool. Rats are rough.
Well, and you know, and it's interesting because we went through those first two slides pretty quickly at the beginning, but whenever we were talking about the light presets on the very first one, when I was talking, yeah, go one more, Dawn. Yes, this one. So, you know, the lighting presets and the one that we have found is that seems to be give you the richest detail looking at those bodies is that center one. But then if you go down one, on this next slide. So this one is the video we're looking at now. And we really found that you really needed to think about changing your lighting and background. So I guess the message is don't be afraid to experiment and find what works best. Don't be afraid to think outside of the box when you're thinking in 3D.
Excellent. And Chris, you know, this is another one, or even Kim, you know, zooming in on that. Again, not something you really can do with a physical form.
Well, you know,
Yeah,
it's really
right.
funny when we were talking about, we wanted to be able to show this a little bit. And it was funny because we were turning the body all different ways and trying to decide, you know, what we were trying to think outside the box, exactly what I'm saying to you about, you know, thinking outside the box a little bit. So, yeah, don't be afraid to, you know, turn that body every which way and point it at different angles to find what you need.
And we always get this, you know, in the old days, the first thing someone did when they got their physical form is they would just start measuring it and measure the hell out of it, right? If you want to talk us through that, I think it would be super helpful.
Yeah, you know, the beautiful thing about having 3D is you can really focus on the shape. And as we talked about in the beginning, you know, trust that it's an exact replica of the fit form. But we understand that, you know, that's the first thing. We're all technical, right? It's the first thing that we want to do. And it's when you think about it, it might be the only thing you want to think about right away. If you really must measure, really, really be sure you understand the different measurement tools available in your chosen software. There's a lot of variables within each one, and you want to be sure that you're choosing the option that's most like measuring with the tape measure, as you would on a physical fit form. This is just an example of the options available in Clo. You know, it's great to have all these options. You just want to be sure that you're using the one that really think about it from a practical point of view, right? We're talking a lot about you're wanting to be able to know that what you're looking at on your physical form is what you're seeing in 3D. So you want to be sure that the measurement, when you're taking a measure, you would want to measure the 3D the same way you would measure the physical form so you can compare apples to apples. One thing we suggest is to review the Alvanon, the Alvaform measurement manual, and it's available on the website to anybody, to ensure that the same method used between 3D is following that same measurement, because Alvanon's perspective, you know, on the measurement manual is that it's based on using a physical tape and from a practical use perspective, so that our users of our forms also have the ability to measure in 3D and get the same result, right? Also, just keep in mind that if you are measuring, the virtual Alvaform measurement tolerance is 1/8 of an inch or 0.3 centimeters. And that's really about, you know, allowing for the variances in the 3D programming and also just the human touch of taking the methods of measure.
Thank you, Chris and
Yeah.
Kim. More than you ever wanted to know. But you know what? It's important. We get these questions constantly. And, you know, we don't want to assume that, you know, even if you've been in 3D for a while, you know, these are good tips to make sure to go back and be able to, why are you evaluating this thing in the first place, right? And some of the things that you can really exploit in 3D that make it, you know, really kind of cool. So, let's continue with our discussion of inclusivity. So we've already talked about the whole concept of how petite is not new, like petite, like plus is really nothing new. And it stands to follow that petite plus follows the same methodology, right? So, you know, again, going back to definitions and assumptions about petite, when you think about it, you know, if the definition of petite is small or short, the whole concept of petite plus would really kind of seem to be an oxymoron. And that's another reason why some of these technical designations and the language that has historically used can be problematic, but again, these are technical designations that and a way for us to be able to distinguish different tools and their characteristics, right? But I will tell you right now that it is nothing new. And if you happen to be an individual who is always looking for bigger size clothing, and you also have to be an individual who is shorter in stature, finding clothing that fits is doubly challenging. And I can promise you, if you do it well, you've made a customer for life. Okay, and petites as well. It's a captive audience, and it's really important to understand that you can create clothing that really caters to their needs. Now, if we go back to the same data slide I showed you before, and again, if you just to refresh your memory, these are all dots of people organized by size and shape. So, you know, if I want to take a minute and kind of annotate this wherever you would choose as a kind of a demarcation line, you know, here I have, you know, a bust measurement of 44 and above, for instance, and a low hip measurement of 46 and above. You can clearly see that there is plenty of potential, even within this data set, for people who would fit that characteristic of having been not only shorter in stature, but also in a bigger size range as well. And again, hiding in plain sight, I challenge you to go take a look around in the mall, the airport, wherever you want to go. Here is another kind of a collage composite of celebrities who maybe some of them have lost weight now, but through their lives may have struggled with, you know, weight and gone up and down, but, you know, they fit into that category. And again, the conspicuous, you can see all the heels here. So again, you know, maybe trying to mask the fact that they might be shorter than average, but, you know, they're there. So following the same logic that we did in the, I'm doing air quotes, regular range, we have our recent North American release of our plus size 20, standing at, again, at 5'6". And now what we've done is we've created our plus petite 20, who is that, again, 5'2", same point of view, bust, waist, low hip, all the girth measurements are going to be exactly the same. Why would we insult a customer by making them both shorter and smaller, and by definition, having them have to size up, right? Industry makes that assumption, and many times they don't realize that they're just making it more difficult for the customers who are looking for this. So again, it's all about proportion. And just as we found in the regular kind of shaping range, bold curve is another shape, body shape that's becoming more prevalent in industry. People are looking for it. And if your brand is about bold curve, you know, we've got it here in plus, and we've got it into the petite as well. So, you know, again, just kind of to give you that, reinforce that indication that it's all about proportion. So here you go. You've got our new standard offer, our regular, our petite 6, bold curve 6, and petite 20 and bold curve 20. Now, there may be some of you out there listening to this who are saying, what is the big deal? Especially if you're not petite, you're like, can't they just go ahead and buy whatever and get over it? No, that's not a very good way to approach it. So, you know, what I like to do now is if I can toss it over, Kim, to you, another way for us to review these things in 3D that give us an advantage in understanding, you know, some of the significant differences here.
Sure. Yeah, I wanted to just give you some examples of what we're seeing on the left is the regular height bold curve plus, and what we're seeing on the right is the bold curve petite plus, and they're both wearing the shirt that was designed for the regular height bold curve plus. And in this one, which is an opaque view, you can see when you look on the right at the petite, the sleeves are long, the hem is a little bit long, but overall, you know, you look at the neck and the shoulder and the upper body and you think, not so bad.
Yeah.
But, you know, but take a look at the transparent view where we can see where the body landmarks are not aligning quite like they should on the right-hand side. So the bust level is a little bit lower on the shirt than it is on the form. The waist is hitting lower, the high hip, the low hip. And some of the things we're not seeing here is the armhole depth, which is a really big one. You know, you get an armhole depth that's too deep on a garment, it gets a little bit restricting lifting up that sleeve, and it gets a little tight. So this is looking at it in a 3D review window where we can look at the regular height and the petite side by side, and we're able to zoom in and rotate it and look a little bit more closely at the body landmarks on the form, and we have the reference lines on the garment that you can see. And what's also really helpful in 3D when we look at it is we can put a pressure map on so we can see the areas that are fitting a little bit more tightly. And what you're going to notice when we turn the pressure map on is that it's fitting a little bit tighter in the upper arm, like I talked about, and also in the high hip area, because you're taking a shirt that's designed for a regular height, putting on that smaller height, that waist that was supposed to sit an inch higher is now sitting an inch lower. So look at the high hip on the back of that shirt. It's, you know, fitting a little bit more closely there. And then also the sleeves, you're seeing that also.
And this is just an example of a shirt, right? So you can imagine other different types of product types would have very similar, if not worse, differences.
Right.
Yeah.
Want to talk a little bit more about, you know, some of the settings in 3D that might affect these evaluations?
Sure. Some of the things in 3D that we've discovered is avatar friction is one of the settings that can be adjusted. There's usually a setting for human, cloth, and plastic. And if you're evaluating a garment on a physical form and you're also evaluating it in 3D, if you have it on the cloth setting, the friction or the stickiness on that avatar to the clothing that you're simulating around it is going to be more closely to what you're seeing in real life in that sample. And this is an example just showing on the left, we have the human texture on, and in order to hold this compression legging up, we have to use styling tools to hold it in place. And when those styling tools are released, you can see in the middle that, you know, that garment is no longer sitting at those body landmarks. It kind of moves around and comes lower at the waist, higher at the leg opening and the knees. And then on the far right, where we have the cloth texture turned on, it is sticking in place, or it is staying in place, like what you would be seeing in your real life avatar or your real life dress form. I like that we have the human feature because, you know, we're going to put this, ultimately, this garment is going to fit on a human, right? So you can look at it that way too. Okay, we can see if it's going to fit the same as what's happening on our physical form, but we have to know what's happening on a human body as well.
Such an important point. We're not making digital product. We're making product for real people using digital tools.
Mm-hmm.
Super important.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great option.
Thank you very much for that tip and trick. Hope use it in good health, everyone. So the other thing that obviously we like to highlight when we go to the trouble of creating a new standard range is really reinforcing the importance of understanding the body growth. So what you're going to see here is a loop of the North American new petite body, starting at the very smallest size in the range, which is a 00, going all the way up to a 36 plus petite. So it's a lot of stuff to take in here. And, you know, maybe Chris, Kim, what are the kind of things you're looking for when you're thinking about garments and how the body is growing?
For me, how many different core sizes I need to actually grade the size range. And so to meet it, I mean, there's a lot of physical things, certainly that, you know, I mean, you can see, you know, when we talk about, I know we've done a lot of work with a lot of people perhaps on this call where, you know, you'll see that inseam getting shorter because the crotch depth is getting deeper. And this really shows that as the body is getting larger, that is actually happening because that's how the crotch depth is getting deeper, because they're not getting taller just because they're getting bigger, right? So yeah, a couple things. pretty well stand out.
I just love this video.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anything else here that maybe people get a little bit surprised by?
Well, I think it's really interesting when you look at, think of a measurement like from the high point of shoulder to the apex. You can see why it's increasing as the sizes get larger.
Oh, yeah.
When you
That's
look
a
at
good one.
this video,
Yeah.
it just
And the
helps you
across
put things
shoulder.
into perspective.
Look,
Yeah,
look-
definitely.
Yeah. Okay. Well, anyway, so, just to be equal opportunity here, I want to show you what the bold curve looks like. So it's the same idea, right? It's just that we're starting out with a different shape, significantly different shape. But again, the same kind of growth principles do remain the same. Isn't that true?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, looking at, big thing when you think about accommodating the customer through the garment grade as well, you can notice what's happening with the across shoulder. It's not growing. There is the extra flesh tissue on the body that is growing, but it's a skeletal measurement. And even though, if you're thinking about a continuous range and that size body's getting bigger, you can see that the extra flesh is there, which you're going to get from adding the girth. But what can you do to improve the grade around the shoulder area? Because the body really isn't just doubling in size.
Yeah, I think that's really always interesting for people who may not have thought of that. All right. In the interest of time, I got to keep moving because I'm looking at the clock here and we're getting close here. The other thing that we want to remember, guys, is that, this whole size set availability also leads to inclusivity, right? If you have the ability to evaluate your entire size range on a virtual size set with these avatars, you're kind of almost, implying that you are taking care of inclusivity through this whole size range. So, and there's a couple of other things that we like to highlight here when we look at this. All of these standards for anybody, if there's anybody out there who's in a merchandising position or anybody who's buying or, considering your distribution of product at the end game here, these standards are designed to be very flexible. Right? You can have continuous ranges. You can have ranges that might overlap in reg and petite. Regular and plus sizes at both the statures. But we have to reiterate that they all emanate from a base core size, which involves reblocking. Chris, you want to take a minute and maybe talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, when you think about looking at how the body is changing, finding the point when, that pattern isn't going to be very well accommodated, once you get beyond to those extended ends of the ranges. And, you want to definitely think about reblocking, at about the size 20 and where you can see the shape really changing. And even in the plus sizes, it might be necessary if you really want to accommodate and be inclusive. What can you do at, say, another size in the plus range around where you see Dawn's cursor around that size? What do we have? I can't see over the top, but either the 28 or the 30. Yeah, the 28 or the 30. Where that body really is changing again, that the pattern is just so different when you talk about going from the Missy from the women's to the plus body, and then even extending that up however far your range might be going. There's absolute, if you really want to be inclusive and really give the best fit for your customer up there, you can't do it only through garment grading. At least not for production, right?
Same is true. Again, this is just showing you the bold curve size set. So you can see a lot of that exaggeration that occurs, like Chris says, where you see shape really evolving. If you're making, really in the bigger size of the range, which there are many brands that do, you have to consider, do I have to take another stab at reblocking here because the shape is just so completely different. Super. All right. Again, I'm getting the buzzer here because we're going a little bit over. So let's take a minute and summarize some of the stuff we've talked about, and hopefully we've got some time left for some Q&A. So again, when we talk about inclusivity, you've heard us say this before, and it's so true. Inclusivity is such a very big umbrella, right, of potential that you have to engage with your end use consumer, right? So at the end of the day, you really want to identify who that target customer is for size, shape, and of course, stature requirements, right? And what we're trying to do for you is, giving you some off-the-shelf options that exist both in physical fit forms and virtual alba forms, so that you can take some of the guesswork out of it, right? Once you've identified that consumer, we want to be able to execute to it. So having said that, you've got the social messaging part of it, telling people what you're doing, but what's the underlying technical solution behind it? So these technical tools is really how you get there, right? You can talk about, we're going to do this and that, but how do we get there? It's really the standardization of the tools. And that includes things like full size sets that allow for that kind of implied full size set inclusivity that's going beyond your core size. And again, when you're thinking about the use of these tools within the context of your business, we provided the opportunity for continuous ranges that would include kind of that reblocking behind the scenes that's invisible to the consumer. You have many brands that have such broad distribution that they have to offer separate range to their customers, right? So what does that look like? Is there a rationalized overlap that we can live with that has a purpose? And there's technical ways to support that. So again, identify that technical solution that's going to map to your merchandising strategy and business model. And above all, when you're going to identify some kind of inclusive size range, you want to provide real clarity on your messaging, not only internally, so everybody that's in the know internally in your team can execute to it, but most importantly, externally to the customer. And Chris, we've talked about that the virtual alba form is literally a digital twin of the physical fit form. Can you just run down some of the reminders here?
Yeah, just know that you can trust the dimensions of it as being the same, and you just think about when you are reviewing it in 3D. It's your opportunity to absolutely assess the shape, the overall shape, and think about your settings in there, and also don't be afraid to think outside the box and turning it more than only rotating it or only in the poses. Be sure to look at the different tools that you have in there of how you can look at it. You can look at it in that mesh view, or turning it to different areas up and down, repositioning it to really assess the shape and have a good understanding of that. And really, if you must measure it, just be sure to understand the tools that you have available in your 3D software and how that compares to how the assumptions are for that the virtual alba form is being measured.
Super. Thanks so much for that. Thanks, Chris and Kim. That was great information. And then, lastly, I'd just like to leave with you, like I said, Alvanon is here to support the digitization of industry. And really the whole concept is providing these tools and these foundations for standardization so that you can begin to build your authentic digital garments. We just said it earlier, and I'll say it again. We are not creating virtual product for virtual people. We're creating real clothes for real people using digital tools, okay? So the more you can have these digital assets created and in place in your environment, the more production ready your brand can be to satisfy the demand that you have and that you need. So again, that whole digital physical garment, authentic digital garments, and we're just really proud to support all of the brands that we work with on that journey. So I guess that's it for the content. We certainly hope you enjoyed it. We went a little longer than we thought, but we still have a good 10 minutes left for some Q&A. So Saul, how are we going to handle that? Where are we going for Q&A?
All right. Well, there's been plenty of questions coming through in the Q&A function. I went ahead and collected some of them for you.
Okay.
All right. So let me just go through them. Okay. So we have a question from Annie Cohen. She says, is 5'4" as an average height consistent as a global demographic?
That's a great question. So yes, it is possible to consider this type of a standard in some applications globally. Again, the real sticking point here is where is the most people in your population lie. So there are going to be other countries for whom a standard of 5'6" is maybe too tall, and a standard of 5'4" might be too short. So, it really depends on the region you're in. It's a great question. But 5'4", I would not consider that a global number. That was a North American number.
Sounds good. Thank you for that clarification. All right, moving on. There's a question from Candy. Do you have average height data for other regions, e.g. the UK, Europe, Asia, etc.?
Sure, we do. A lot of it's available, even online. You can search for it if you'd like. But again, it's more about taking that data in context with what you're trying to do for your particular market segment. We don't want to blindly follow averages because it's one data point that's meant to reference a certain, highlight a certain point. We don't rely on averages in general to tell us, what to do with our standards, the reference points.
Good to know. Here's a question maybe for Chris and Kim from Laura. It says, well, I understand that the circumference measurements don't change through the various poses. However, when a human is in a T-pose, the bust changes position. Does the 3D software take that into account in the various poses?
Well, when we talk about the body deformation, even the bust position can vary when you think about wearing a bra, right? The virtual alviform is considered to be wearing a moderate support. When we are changing the poses, we're thinking there's more about the muscle deformation that might happen across the back. And that's what you might see. And especially when we talk about going into movement, then yes, we are paying attention to that.
Great. Here, it's not a question, but a comment from Pamela. This is such great information. The NA Petite body growth video was the best. So no question, just bravo. All right. A question from Andrew, and I think you touched on this, Don, but maybe we should clarify it a little bit more. What defines bold curve versus plus?
That's a great question. It's all about the name, what's in a name. Many people use the word curve as a euphemism for plus sizing, and that's fine. We can't legislate how people choose to describe things. Typically, when we use the word bold curve in the work we do, it's really about the overall body shaping characteristic, not about size. So it has been common over the years for people to refer to as curvy sizing as a euphemism for plus sizing. In our world, we're referring to a different shaping characteristic regardless of size. I hope that helps.
All right, perfect. All right. Let's see, we have another question here. It says, what can we do better in 3D on the form that we can't in the physical?
Well,
Kim.
yeah, I think we kind of alluded to it earlier. You can't pick up a physical form and spin it around and, look at all the different angles. You can, but, it'd be physically challenging. And then also we showed you the transparent or the mesh view, being able to turn that on so that you can see the different angles of the shapes of the armholes, trajectory of the neck, shapes of the rise, and those kind of things.
Great. Here's a question from June, which I think is probably a follow-up to this. It's about 3D softwares. Do the 3D avatars work in a variety of 3D programs, or are they specific to Browser and Clo3D?
Yes, they do. I think we have, is it 10 or 12 softwares, 3D softwares?
We do. For anyone interested, you can go to avp.alvanon.com and you can see a selection there. All right, time for a couple more questions. I just want to say that we do have a lot of questions, but if you have any more, just send them through and we're going to do our best to get back to you if not today, after. Okay, so here we go. Another question, can you review a full-size set of bodies in 3D side by side?
Yes, you can. And however, I recommend, reviewing jump sizes, because the more bodies you pull in, the smaller and further away the details get. But you can pull them into windows and put them side by side and have them dressed and be able to, zoom in and turn them around and evaluate them the same way that we showed you how to evaluate a reference form.
Good. Here's a question, maybe for Chris, from Jennifer Russell. Is there any evidence that it's necessary to reblock more frequently in the petite range?
No, I don't think so. I think that that's kind of a best practice regardless of the range that you might be working in. It's more about we talked a little bit about how the petite doesn't mean she's always smaller, that the measurements are actually pretty much the same. So it'd be the same philosophy no matter where you're working.
All right, fantastic. Maybe time for one more. Let's see, is there a recommended pose to use for fitting? Do you find the need to change the pose based on the style you're working on?
Oh, the pose, did you say? So, yeah, the recommended pose to start with for fitting is with the arms down. And of course, moving through the poses as you want to see different things, then you certainly have those options.
All right, fantastic. Well, I think that's all the time we have for Q&A. I think we're running top of the hour, but this is being recorded and we'll go ahead and send it. Just any final closing notes from you guys?
No, take advantage of the tools that are available. We spent a lot of time putting them together and it's all for you. So, no matter where you are in 3D, hopefully today has been helpful. Saul, we're going to be doing a lot more personal engagements this year, right? We've reconstituted our live workshops. So people like Chris and Kim, myself, Liz might be showing up in your area. I think we have one in Charlotte that's already sold out 2 weeks from now, but keep a lookout for the website because we will do several of them throughout this year, going a lot deeper on digital product creation and that kind of thing. So we hope to see you there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think I can kind of like give a little bit away in saying that, our next location is going to be Seattle, but there are only 25 seats, or, that's as big a group that we sort of do for these workshops. So if you are interested, keep an eye out. We'll probably go live with that tomorrow. All right, well, fantastic. Well, today, Dawn, Chris, and Kim have introduced the new North American Women's Petite, Petite Plus, and Bold Curve Petite standards. But as I mentioned, this is one standard in the full catalog of North American standards. We also have thoroughly researched standards in North America for North America men, women, and plus women, children, and even extended size children. Lastly, we here at Alvanon are really excited to present this information to you and hope it has been informative. If you have any additional questions, please contact your local salesperson. On behalf of Chris, Kim, Dawn, and myself, we want to thank you for joining us today. And we hope you have a terrific day, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
So long.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right. That is a wrap.
Yay.
All right. I'm going to turn this. I'll see you guys in a little bit.
Okay. Bye-bye.